probably 2 months have gotten myself fired up about the idea that the media has declared war on police, and they've declared war on imposing consequences or incarceration for people that commit crimes. And so I've got a new heading on our Facebook page, which is Ray the DA, and that's what it's called. The Media War on Cops and War on Consequences for Criminal Behavior Department. And then I put whatever kind of articles or that sort of thing that I see. And it's all about accepting the narrative that the media has created. For example, they know that in Ferguson, Missouri, that this hands up, don't shoot narrative that they have put out there is a lie. They know that.
And knew it the whole time.
But they continue to push it so that it's anti-police.
Listen, here's what happens, and I want to make this point because I was in this before. So you're a police officer, and you develop a relationship with someone who reports police stories and stuff. And in that relationship, you're able to talk to them about things, and sometimes, and they believe you. You become a source for them, if it's to your benefit, benefit of your cases, whatever. So you develop a trust. All that goes out the window, though, whenever the national media wants to send out a certain narrative. In other words, you can no longer make the call and say, "Listen, I know this is what you're hearing, but let me tell you the truth. What you're going to find out in this, it's not like it is. So, you might want to back off of the propaganda about the hands up. This coroner report's coming. Just trust me." Then it gets ignored. They know they know exactly what the real narrative is, and we see that. We really see that more in the national media for whatever reason than anywhere.
I'll tell you something else. I'm getting really upset. Some time ago, we had a case in which the defense attorney wanted his client to plead guilty because he was guilty. And the client said, "No, I'm not going to plead guilty unless there's a better deal than that." So he didn't plead guilty. And you know what the defense attorney said in his opening statement? "My client didn't do it."
Yeah.
And I was just stunned. I really was just stunned by that. It's one thing to say they got to prove it.
Sure.
They got to prove it, and or they haven't proved it, and that sort of thing. But to come out and just absolutely know that your client did it, and then to say he didn't do it.
I mean, I've always thought,
I have a
isn't it?
dishonesty.
No.
I have a hard time with
Listen,
dishonesty.
defense attorneys are very important. They're the other half of our system. We got to have them. Just like we have to have prosecutors and police. They're part of it. That's what makes it work. It's just my perception was, as an attorney, when you represent somebody, it's not your job to get them off. It's your job to make sure that they are treated fairly within the system that we have. Is that not correct?
No, it's not.
It's your job to get them off.
Let me tell you something. This is really, it's very interesting if you want to understand how the cards are stacked against prosecution or enforcement. The ethical rules require the prosecutors to seek justice. Seek justice. The ethical rules for a defense attorney is represent your client.
So it's unethical for a prosecutor to prosecute someone that the prosecutor doesn't know, doesn't feel has done.
Is not convinced is guilty.
Yes, the prosecutor has to be convinced he's guilty based on the law before the prosecutor is, because that's not justice. It's not just to prosecute somebody that you don't feel is guilty.
That's right. That's right. it would be immoral,
Yes.
in my opinion, to go forward with a case that I wasn't convinced the person was guilty. And we know a lot more about a case than we're allowed to introduce at a trial. And
But I did not know this. But you're saying the ethical standards, if you're representing someone,
represent your client.
just do whatever.
No, represent your client is basically. Now, I won't say do whatever.
Yeah.
That's not something I'll say. What I will say is their ethical standard is represent your client. The ethical standard for prosecution is seek justice. See, now and justice is, Officer Don, the first 2 years I was in private practice in Paducah. I saw 300 people in there that were selected by a computer, from voter registration, from property owners to, did you file a tax return, do you have a driver's license? And it was a very diverse group, and in they came, and from those 300 people, they selected 12 people, just at random. They put their numbers back in a box. You don't even know their name. And pulled 12 numbers out of the box. That was the grand jury. And she said, that I had a completely different attitude. And I said, well, why don't you write about it? And so she wrote a little one-page paper about it. And the title of it was Grand Jury Selection Was Absolutely Nothing Like I Thought It Would Be. Now, that's where you are in this whole process. And it's very interesting because an African-American reporter for the Lexington newspaper wanted to do a story on grand juries because he was more interested in police-involved shootings. Mm-hmm. And so I sent him this Ashley Lewis's little paper that she wrote, and I said, "You want to write about the grand jury? Drag your rear end over here because we're going to do it tomorrow morning." And I said, "Be there at 9:30." Well, he was there, sitting right in the middle of it, and we'd go upstairs with the grand jury and do an orientation about the procedures that the grand jury does. And he called me up and he said, I had the same attitude as Ashley Lewis. And he said millions of African Americans had the same attitude. And he said this was really an eye-opener. Her paper was an eye-opener. And when I saw how it happened, it was an eye-opener.
Sometimes things are so obvious to people who are in the middle of it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
You've been selecting grand juries for years. You've been part of that process. I've been part of that process. We know this is facts, and it just blows our mind when people have these perceptions. You're like, where do they come from? Because it's so far from the truth that it's not even, to us, even something we never thought we would have to address. There's so many checks and balances in our criminal justice system. At every level. And plus, we also know, and this is just the truth, that as Mike DeGero pointed out, 99.9999 whatever percent, not just 95% of the people involved are good people or trying to do the right thing. And the very few that aren't, okay, the so-called rogues are surrounded by people that are watching for those wolves in sheep's clothing that have infiltrated our justice system in whatever way, and they're working to get them out too. So there are checks and balances there. I've seen them. If you take a police department, for instance, where we were broken up in squads, basically, and I might have a sergeant, and there's 5 officers, and that sergeant supervises the 5 officers, and we're all trained to a certain standard. And when you have somebody that's not behaving to that standard, if it's not anything particularly egregious, if it's a personality issue or you don't feel like he's treating citizens like he should, then, we would talk amongst ourselves about that. We'd talk, and if it got bad, we'd talk to the sergeant about it. We'd talk to him about it, talk to her about it. And ultimately, I've always found those people weeded out. Sometimes you have but it was so rare to not have that. And it's just when all people want to focus on are what really statistically is inconsequential. you know, the very few, you just go, man, you know, what do you want from us?
It's the
what a police
narrative.
officer is saying.
It's the narrative, you see, and the media is beating on police over and over again. People believe it, and that's what they're doing, and it just is very offensive to me.
And the only stories you see right now, the national narrative of police officers that I think are good, is when you got some cop that's driving down the road in his cruiser and he gets caught singing Taylor Swift, "Shake It Up." You know, oh look, he's got personality. Or when
Is if somebody's breaking into your house and you don't trust the police, who are you going to call?
Don't call them. That's right. But the very people that claim they don't trust are the first one to dial 911. You know, that's and that's fine. We want them to, but at some point you got to enough is enough, guys. You know, let's deal with the situation we have to deal with that are wrong, but let's also focus on the 99.999%.
No. Let me tell you the
about 30
percentage.
seconds.
Mike DeGero talked about the number of complaints, and it turned out to be only 4 1,000ths of 51 million contacts. That is 99.996% of the police are excellent.
Yeah. We'll see you next week on In Touch.